Hey guys, it's me, Hermitage, and welcome to the first ever reading of Lyoko Chronicles, Book 1, The Underground Castle. Now, to preface, I have not read this story on my own. And let me get this a little bit here. Underground Castle, Book 1. As I did before, I will only do chapters in separate videos. If the chapters are really short, then I can do like dual chapters to pad up more time. Now, I regret to inform you that I will not be reading this myself. Because it is still light, not like in a dark mode. And I will let the computer read this for me. Now, I do apologize. If the computer will not pronunciate words right, as I've been keeping tabs on it. Now, hopefully you all will enjoy this, and make sure to read along.
Tonight it will be 10 years since I first met her, and I've decided the time has come to tell our story. To reveal the incredible facts that we witnessed together, Yumi Ishiyama, Ulrich Stern, Adela Rabia, and myself, Jeremy Belpoise. And Elida, naturally. Not one day has passed when I've not thought of you, Elida. This history is for all of my friends, but it is above all else for you, Elida. Good knows if you are still listening. Jeremy. 1. A butterfly at the bottom of the Sea of Japan, December 21st. They say that if a butterfly flaps its wings in Beijing, in New York there is rain instead of sunshine. Quite possibly they are right, at least some of the time, but it is difficult to say. Everyone notices when it starts raining, but the fact remains that no one is ever in a position to trace the butterfly responsible. On Tuesday, December 21st, at 2:26 p.m., the ship KNT-17 came to rest at anchor in the wide expanse of the Sea of Japan, and one of the officers made radio contact with the ship's land base. We are in position. On the receiving end of the message was Yukiko Ito, a beautiful Japanese girl some 23 years of age, listening in from the ship's land base. From the comm of her workstation, Yukiko controlled several screens that encircled her, and adjusting a microphone to her mouth she replied, "Base here, all clear. You have permission to launch Rovi whenever you want." The KNT-17 was a cable ship. Her mission was to monitor the telecommunications cables that connected Japan to the United States. This simple-sounding task had one major complication, however. The cables were at a depth of more than 1,000 meters below sea level. And here was where Rovi entered the game, as the staff who oversaw the intense operation familiarly thought of it. In spite of the irreverent nickname, Rovi was in fact a highly sophisticated robot. An ROV, remotely operated vehicle, and about the only thing capable of operating undisturbed in the unimaginable pressures of the ocean abysses. From the monitors of her workstation, Yukiko was presented with a twin view. One was of the robot, looking like a gigantic yellow hermit crab as it descended towards the waves, suspended from the boom of a large crane, and on the other display was the face of the officer who was her counterpart aboard the ship. "How are you, sweet creature?" his voice squawked from the radio transmitter. Yukiko laughed. "You mean me?" "No, You misunderstood me, I was speaking to Rovi. She laughed. Focus on the job. The longer we waste time, the longer Japan remains disconnected from the internet. 6 hours ago the cable deep below the KNT-17 had begun to experience intermittent signal loss, and it was quickly becoming worrisome. Through it passed the majority of telephone and email signals exchanged between Japan and America, and vice versa. They had to act quickly, but with precision. Diving speedily underwater, thanks to its powerful helix-shaped propellers, Rovi soon intercepted the cable, a giant black snake that lay on the seafloor, stretching to infinity in both directions. All around the ocean was silent and lifeless. At this depth, there were not even any fish. Without the luminous bundle of lights suspended ahead of the robot's watertight television camera, the screen in front of Yukiko would have seemed completely extinguished. Several minutes passed. Then, the hush was broken by the sudden sound of the officer's voice in her headphones. We seem to have found the source of the breakdown. Looks like it was nothing too serious. From one of Rovi's internal compartments a mechanical arm emerged, then it grew and extended until it grazed the surface of the cable. And at that moment, Yukiko's electronic instrumentation went berserk. Wait, it's stopped, she yelled instinctively. What's happened? It was an incredible data burst, I think. I don't know how to explain it, but it seems like a blockage cleared in the cable. Yukiko, can you repeat that? You sound upset. You heard me perfectly. As soon as you touched the cable, the signal resumed. But I'd only grazed it. And how do you explain a fiber optic cable becoming blocked? The girl ignored the comment and quickly glanced to her monitors. No matter how she looked at it, everything seemed to have slotted back into place. The telecommunications signals were relaying perfectly. Do you want us to proceed with the repairs anyway? No, continuing would serve nothing. Suspend the mission. Recover Rovi and return to home base. Perfect. Then tonight we can go out together. Yukiko smiled and tidied up a lock of hair behind her ear. Sure, why not? While in Japan the internet was resuming normal operations, in France a 13-year-old girl was having breakfast in the cafeteria of Kadak Academy. She was known as Elita Stones, but in the course of her short life had been called by many names. Not tall for her age, she had a small, upturned nose, large eyes and hair the color of flame styled in a helmet bob. She wore comfortable dungarees and had a serious air about her that contrasted with the joy of the other students. Around her table the atmosphere was festive. It was the penultimate day of school before the Christmas holidays, and lessons would only be resumed 20 days later in January. Bags of time to spend at home in the company of their families. Elita, however, had other plans, which were not as pleasant. Her parents, in fact, were no more. She had the impression that centuries had passed in which she was alone in the world. Since that horrible day when her father... Is everything all right? Someone called and she turned to the familiar features of Jeremy. Jeremy Belpoise was 13 years old like her, but his hair was blonde, worn slightly long, and round glasses perched on his nose. Jeremy was an important person to her, especially since that terrible day on which her father... Elita. The girl was frozen, her croissant in midair and her mouth ajar, a lost look in her empty eyes. She's just paralyzed with emotion, commented a third friend. Adela Rabia was grinning like usual, his hair spiked back from his head in its usual rock star look. So Jeremy, our diabolical plan is ready. Odd said, turning to his friend. To the most minute detail, Jeremy agreed. Elita will come to my home for Christmas. My mother's ecstatic at having a girl to spoil. What about you? Put a sock in it, Odd. Ah, our little computer science romance. Jeremy flared up, but he continued to speak as if nothing had happened, staring down at his plate. We'll return to the academy on Sunday the 9th, a day before lessons resume. Perfect. What have you told your parents? That we're staying with Ulrich's family for that night. So have I. Hopefully they won't check. And what about the others? Do you know how they feel? No, but we've already discussed everything. I don't believe there will be any difficulties. Hey, Elita, still here with us? Odd suddenly asked the girl, having noticed that throughout their conversation she had not moved a single muscle. The croissant was still frozen in front of her nose. Elita, if this is intended as a joke it isn't amusing, Jeremy said with a worried air. The girl stared fixedly at him, batting her eyelids uncertainly. Jeremy, is that your name, honestly? He stared incredulously, and then she laughed in embarrassment. Odd pretended to play along with her game. Yes, he's Jeremy and I'm Odd. We're your best friends. Don't you remember? He'd intended it as a witty remark, but Elida did not laugh. No, she replied. To the empty house, city of the Iron Tower, France, January 9th, the new year greeted the world with exceptionally cold weather. On the morning of Sunday, January 9th, the train arrived at the station an hour late. The rails were just two pronounced dark strips. It had snowed all night, and the snow continued to fall even now. When the train's doors opened with a gasp, Jeremy helped Elida unload their suitcases. "Welcome back, guys," a voice greeted them from the platform. "I've been waiting a while for you." The voice belonged to Ulrich Stern, a tall and wiry boy wrapped up in a red quilted jacket. He had donned a woolen cap to protect himself from the wind, but from under its brim a dark and rebelliously pointed forelock fell onto his forehead. Elida and Jeremy were delighted to see him again. "Hey Ulrich, did the holidays go well for you?" Their friend shook his head and Jeremy knew better than to press any further. Ulrich was going through an ugly period where he rarely agreed with his parents on anything. Ulrich raised the two suitcases without effort and turned to the girl. "Elida, how are you? How was life at Casa Belpoise?" Elida smiled. "Jeremy's parents have been wonderful. And his mother is a fantastic cook." "Magnificent," Ulrich murmured. Then he looked at them in silence, unsure of how to ask the question that had weighed most on his mind while he'd waited at the station. In the end, he chose his favorite approach, to confront the problem directly. "So now, is your memory becoming any clearer?" Elida pressed the coat tighter to herself. Her breath misted out of her mouth in light clouds. "We think it is. I remember who you are, and that's something." Ulrich smiled. They started through the streets of the city, slipping on the gravel surfaces. The snow gave everything an unusual, almost unreal aspect, the pavement becoming confused with the asphalt and the grass of gardens, like a single, soft, white carpet. "Cold, isn't it? I'm afraid we're all going to freeze in that empty house," Jeremy grumbled, shuddering. "Don't worry," Ulrich reassured. "Yumi slipped away ahead of us to light the boiler. It'll be like a fairy tale." "Is Odd already back in the city?" Jeremy inquired, blowing on his frozen hands. "He got back this morning. He's helping Yumi prepare the house." "Fantastic." "Yeah," agreed Ulrich. "Our diabolical plan, as Odd keeps calling it, is working perfectly." The plan to return to the city one day before classes resumed, unbeknownst to their parents, had been Jeremy's idea. The goal was to spend one single Sunday together, with no one else interfering in their affairs. He and Odd were allegedly staying at Ulrich's house, while Ulrich was supposedly at Jeremy's, and Yumi at Elida's. To avoid the risk of being exposed, Jeremy had used a reliable old computer application of his own creation to mimic the voice of each parent and had called the individual families to confirm the various excuses. It was indeed a diabolical plan. And now, thanks to it, they had the time and peace necessary to tackle a certain issue. Someone had cleaned the snow from the wooden plate affixed to the gate, and now the inscription Hermitage was quite legible. Beyond the fence the garden had the same lunar aspect as the rest of the city. A double row of footprints had plowed the snow up to the steps of the porch leading to the front door. The Hermitage was a high and narrow standalone villa, 3 stories tall above the basement, with a drooping roof and a low garage that leaned against the house as if to support it. Surrounding them were snow-covered fir trees that grew thicker towards the rear of the building, where only a single line of low fencing separated the garden from the grounds of Kadak Academy. Elida observed the darkened windows, the white colonnade that supported the porch, the trees. "Do you remember this house?" Jeremy asked. "Vaguely, but it's more like a sensation, like this was a place to which I felt a great attachment." Jeremy nodded. "I would say that was a positive start. It's promising, but we'd better get indoors before even our thoughts freeze." Inside, Odd was attaching a colorful festoon to the ceiling. As soon as he heard them open the door, he vaulted down the staircase with cat-like agility. He gave a vigorous slap on the shoulder to Ulrich and ran to embrace Elida in a hug, while Jeremy threw a jealous look at him. "Hi guys," greeted Yumi, hurling herself out of the kitchen, smiling in her usual thin, enigmatic way, but her almond eyes shining. Yumi Ishiyama was the last one in their group of friends, the eldest of them and, at least in theory, the most responsible. Tall and lean, she loved to dress in black, the same color as her gleaming raven hair. Her parents were Japanese natives who had moved to France when she was a newborn. "How were your holidays?" Jeremy asked her. "Not bad. I managed to go skiing. And yours?" The conversation was suddenly interrupted by the din of things being thrown into the air. An instant later Kiwi, Odd's scrappy little dog, appeared and began to happily run about between them, his stumpy tail waggling furiously. Between welcome back hugs and slaps, the friends shared stories of their vacations like sweets. Then the moment had passed and they decided they should put themselves to work. Ulrich climbed onto the staircase to continue arranging the festoons, while Odd and Jeremy, the cooks of the group, moved into the kitchen. Yumi's mother had prepared a large tray of pasta to go in the oven, and the other expenses had been covered by the girl herself, buying popcorn, drinks, a pre-cooked roast and 1 sack of potatoes. "Try to avoid cutting yourself on the finger," Jeremy recommended, while Odd squatted down on a chair, the potato peeler in his hand. His friend ignored the jab. "So, tell me, how's Elida?" he asked suddenly, as if it was the thing that mattered the most to him. "Well," Jeremy said, tightening his shoulders, "her memory has almost completely returned now. She remembers us and several events from the last few years." He pondered for a moment, before adding, "Except Lyoko." "What do you mean, except Lyoko?" Jeremy sighed. "What I mean is that every memory she has regarding Lyoko has been completely eradicated from her mind. And her memories of X.A.N.A. X.A.N.A. Odd finished peeling 1 potato and took hold of another. "I meant to ask if you thought this amnesia was X.A.N.A.'s fault."
Wow. X.A.N.A. Now I'm really wondering if I should have read this myself. Wow.
"Possible," Jeremy sighed, his heart heavy. X.A.N.A. is dead. "Whoa. I'm stuffed," Ulrich exclaimed, allowing himself to lean back in his chair. "And guess who has to do the dishes?" winked Odd. Hey, don't talk to me about that. That's a woman's work." Yumi thrust out to jab her elbow in his stomach. "Me and Elida were thinking of helping you," she said with a malicious smile, "but since, as you say, it's a woman's work, we'll leave that honor to you." Ulrich grumbled, while the others sniggered with relish. Suddenly Jeremy rose from the table, disappeared for an instant into an adjacent room and returned carrying a satchel. "The plates can wait, guys. What do you say to going on a walking tour?" he proposed enthusiastically. Odd was not much for the idea. "Have you seen the weather, Einstein?" he protested, indicating out the window. "It's at least 1,000 degrees below zero. And I bet it's going to start snowing again soon." "It doesn't snow at 1,000 degrees below zero," Einstein said patiently, while Odd snorted and rolled his eyes at the ceiling, "and in any case we don't have to go particularly far. Just up to Cadix grounds." Yumi regarded Jeremy with a serious expression on her face. "What do you have in mind?" she asked. Jeremy had opened the bag he had recovered and extracted a little digital camcorder from it. "I wanted to do a video diary," he explained. "I thought it could be fun to tell this camcorder everything that's happened to us. And for all we know it might one day prove useful to us." "A perfect idea," Yumi nodded, convinced. "Actually I'm with Odd," commented Ulrich. "I don't understand why we should put in so much effort." Yumi elbowed him in the stomach a second time, this time with more precision and force. "Ah. So, shall we give this a chance?" Jeremy exhorted, this time not meeting with any objections. They slipped on their coats and scarves and ventured outdoors. The sky was a clear gray that was deepening to violet, snow weather. Jeremy led the way round the back of the house, Odd and Elida alternating behind him. Ulrich brought up the rear and drew closer to Yumi. "You could have been a bit gentler with those elbows," he murmured resentfully. "Aren't you supposed to be the big martial arts champion?" she pressed back, "and don't tell me you don't understand why Jeremy has proposed this." To tell you the truth, no. It's obviously for Elida, right? If we talk about Lyoko, from the beginning to the end, she'll possibly recover her memory." Ulrich dragged his cap lower down his forehead, a little unconvinced. They went out of the Hermitage's back gate and struck out across the school's grounds. Here the snow lay so high that it nearly reached their knees and everything was immersed in a soft silence. Kiwi proceeded by hops and bounds, disappearing at intervals into the white expanse. They walked until they could just glimpse the dark shapes of Kadok's palatial buildings, the sloping roofs appearing black against the pale background of the winter sky. Eventually the group stopped. In a small glade, completely alone, Jeremy and Odd started digging in the snow with their hands. "You'll see," Ulrich whispered to Yumi, "Odd won't be able to resist 5 seconds. 4, 3, he got as far as 1, at which point Odd scooped some fresh snow into his hands, compacted it into a big ball and flung it at them with all his strength. Ulrich ducked and the ball struck Yumi square in the face. "Ha ha." Ulrich laughed, slapping her on the shoulder. "What did I tell you? You're going to pay for that, Odd," Yumi cried, her hands already sinking into the snow. And in the next instant, battle broke out. "Enough, enough, I surrender," Elita panted, several minutes later. She allowed herself to fall on the ground beside Jeremy, who had raised his own white flag shortly into the fight. The rush for snowballs had cleared a beautiful glade of snow, and set in the green tufts of grass was the rusted iron disc of a big manhole cover. Although there was nothing strange about the manhole itself, it was about the commonest of circular metal plates. It was unusual in that it was not in the center of a road, but instead in the middle of a beautiful private park, amidst the grass and the trees. "Ulrich," Jeremy called, preparing the camcorder, "could you begin to tell us, from the beginning?" "Ulrich, you can start." "Hello. Well, in truth you must have been the first to go down the manhole, not me." "Come on Ulrich, it's not difficult," insisted Yumi. "If you begin, I'll help you with the dishes later." "Done deal." Well, if that's the case, he gave in, clearing his throat. Even if they had none of their own, they all understood Jeremy's motives for choosing to start at the manhole. It was down there that everything had begun. To Ulrich, Jeremy was little more than the class SWAT. Since they'd both entered Kadok Academy they'd only ever shared a few hastily grumbled hellos. It was not until much, much later that Ulrich had actually noticed Jeremy. Seen from the air, Kadok Academy resembled a gigantic fork. From the main gate one entered the vast grounds, bisected by 2 tree-lined avenues that led up to the entrance into the administrative building. Behind that the structures formed a series of horseshoes, so that they created 3 large courtyards, one surrounded by classrooms, the central one, which held the 2 low buildings that served as the school's refectories, and finally the largest courtyard, which extended into the sports ground. That day Ulrich was standing next to one of the drinks machines scattered around the campus. With him was Odd, his new roommate, who was speaking non-stop and gesturing wildly, while he quietly sipped a drink from a can. At a certain point, Jeremy had approached the machine, had inserted a coin and pressed a key. What followed was an electric shock so great as to make him drop to the ground like a sack of potatoes. After a moment's hesitation, Ulrich had run to assist and accompanied Jeremy into the infirmary. Fortunately nothing serious had happened to the SWAT. Ulrich had greeted him and then left in a pensive state of mind. Some days later, Ulrich had heard cries coming from Jeremy's room. He burst in running to find his classmate attempting to fight off some kind of tin box on tiny wheels. Evidently one of his science projects had gone haywire. "Give me a hand." "Shut it off." Ulrich had pulled the robot's plug from the wall socket, returning everything to normal. "Thanks. Figures. Guess I've developed a taste for saving your skin." Jeremy Belpoise had regarded him seriously from behind the tarnished lenses of his glasses and, after a moment of silence, had declared, "There's more to it than you know." "What do you mean?" "I can't explain it to you, not here." "So where can you?" "Outside. In the grounds." "But not right now, wait until tomorrow." Ulrich had stared incredulously for several seconds. But in the end, he had nodded his assent. The sun was sparkling between the leaves, projecting a green and fresh light over everything. The shadows cast by the trees provided a bit of relief on that hot spring day. Ulrich had watched perplexedly as his new friend had jumped like a rabbit from one bush to another. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Jeremy glanced archly at him in retort, "No one's obliging you to be here. I'm here because of you. I don't trust myself to leave you alone, given your amazing talent for attracting trouble." The truth was however that the comical boy in the glasses, who until recently had always played the role of a mysterious hermit, had now tickled his curiosity. Here, Jeremy finally exclaimed, "Found it." The manhole that rose from the grass definitely left a strange impression. It was decidedly out of place, like a chicken using a city crosswalk, or a man wearing a swimsuit to a formal dinner. "Give me a hand," Jeremy said. Together, the two boys managed to lift the heavy iron plate. A series of rusted handles led down into a vertical shaft, disappearing in the dark. The smell that wafted up from the bottom was definitely unpleasant. "And we have to go down there?" "I'm not forcing you to hear my story," Jeremy said curtly, already lowering himself into the hole. Ulrich hesitated for a moment until he gathered himself together, and followed purposefully, climbing down into the shaft like a blind man. Further and further down. Suddenly, his foot did not land on another rung but only empty air. His legs swung out and, unwilling to release his grip on the rungs, he was left immobile, hanging in the shaft like a length of salami. Then he heard Jeremy's voice resounding up from beneath him. "What are you doing up there? That's the end of the ladder. You've got to jump." "Excuse me? Did you say jump? Come on, it's no more than 1.5 meters." Caught in the concrete pipe, Ulrich began to ask himself what he had done to deserve this. Jeremy had seemed to be a quiet boy, but evidently something was not right in his head. Like all the great geniuses, some of his cogs must be out of place. "Ulrich, get moving." Ulrich let go. He tumbled down and quickly rose to his feet, surprised to find himself still intact. He checked around and saw that they were in a wide and badly illuminated tunnel, so deep that he could not even glimpse the roof. He also noticed that his trousers were soaked. Something like a gray river was flowing in the bottom of the tunnel and, oh, he had never smelt a stench like it. The stink that impregnated the air was nearly solid. I can't breathe," he gasped. "That's soiled water," Jeremy explained calmly. "We're in the sewers after all, my friend." "Oh, the ideal place for a perfect picnic. Well then, brace yourself. The sooner we push on, the sooner we get out." Ulrich had to repeat that twice to himself. The two boys set off along a kind of pavement that skirted the edge of the filthy waters culvert. Their shadows grew long and tall on the curved walls, contorting themselves into monstrous figures, while around them the absolute silence was broken only by the sound of their footsteps and some frightened squeaks. "Rats," ventured Ulrich. "Poor little boy, what part of we are in the sewers don't you understand? Obviously they're rats. And if you really want to know, those black things floating around down there are, okay. I understand." Ulrich interrupted him with a hasty gesture. After some time the tunnel was abruptly interrupted, a grating barred the passage across its full width, making their progress impossible. Here a new set of iron rungs was embedded in the wall, disappearing upwards. "That's how we return to the surface." Ulrich sighed. He was certain the smell of the sewers would be impregnated into his clothes forever. At the top of the climb a second metal trapdoor awaited them. When they shifted it the sunlight almost blinded them. Ulrich scrambled up and out. And his breath was taken away. They had come out onto the bridge leading to the old factory, a gigantic building that occupied the entirety of a solitary, sun-beaten island. Around them, the waters of the river that ran a short distance from Kadak gurgled tranquilly. Behind Ulrich, a great gate surmounted by barbed wire blocked the road which, at one time, had allowed trucks to cross the city's industrial quarter to reach the factory. Now the asphalt was cracked and broken, and tufts of green grass were pushing up here and there through the carriageway. And the bridge did not seem to be in the best of condition either. The metal spans were covered in rust and had a decidedly precarious look to them. But the panorama was definitely one of a kind. The bridge enjoyed a spectacular view over the river and, in the distance, over the deserted sheds, could be seen the tops of trees and the majestic profile of the buildings at Kadak. "Beautiful, smiled Jeremy. "Yeah. Dunno why there's nobody here anymore. I've made some research into it, and, well, come up with nothing. The factory failed when we were both little. Instead of selling it, for some reason the owners preferred to leave it here to molder. Then the new industrial zone was built outside the city, and this quarter went to ruin." Jeremy paused and regarded the whole of the island. "Sooner or later someone will buy it and build us a car park. Or office buildings. Or perhaps a hotel even," he concluded. The factory, with its extinguished smokestacks, had a melancholy air. Ulrich thought it was certainly not a bad idea to take advantage of all its vacant space. You could replace it with arenas, skateboard tracks, business premises. Or perhaps build an amusement park that would really turn heads. Let's go, Jeremy said, setting out across the bridge. Where? It seems obvious enough to me. Into the factory.
Now, I don't know about you, but that had a storyline seem a whole lot familiar. Santa in Part 1, anyone? Anyway, I've drawn out the 2-chapter long story. We're 30 pages in already, and soon we'll be heading right into chapter 3. Now, I would like to take a chance to apologize for the computer lack of some understanding with the words, like Lyoko, Santa, and like I feared, Elida, in replacing with Ilida. And now I'm taking a whole big interest in this new story. And I really wonder what's going to become left of it. So, hopefully, we'll see on the next video. See ya.